Be well and be brilliant. Today, more than ever, humanity needs you.
I don't know what to say. I actually am lost for words.
You don't have a right to not be vulnerable and authentic. Your number one currency in life is to have an impact on someone else.
Like, you have blown me away to the other side of the world, and I don't know how I'm going to get back.
Because if you lead with your humanity, you elevate theirs.
I am so grateful that the universe connected me with you, because this has been a game changer for me.
If you lead a doubt-filled life, you'll lead a bound-up life. Live a doubtless life and you'll lead a boundless life.
This has just been the most extraordinary experience of my entire life.
Leadership is in the form of your brand, and in today's brand, it's your vulnerability, your ability to be authentic, your ability to be seen.
Because you're just a game changer. I've just never met anyone like you.
Your ability, as I say, to live your eulogy, not wait for someone to mourn you after you've gone.
And here we are. Boom. We are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Live Experience with Stephen DeSede, the live experience with Stephen DeSede. So how is Stephen today? How are you today, my fine friend?
As soon as I unmute myself, there you go. That would help.
Hey, welcome to your show. Welcome to your show.
Welcome to my show, and I muted myself.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
How
are things down there, buddy?
They're good. Yeah, no, they're good. Things seem to be progressing pretty well, and hopefully it'll continue. So
awesome.
Hopefully it'll continue, which is good.
Great. Well, I know we have another good show lined up for everybody, and of course, you know, these shows are so amazing because they are literally set up to be this live experience. The live experience meaning that some of the interactions and conversations that we have are completely unrehearsed. They are live. They are,
yes.
I'm not even sure exactly what we're talking about today, so I'm so excited because this is why it's so much fun to kind of do it this way.
I'm not even sure.
I'm pretty sure.
Scariest bit.
Well, I do know that you gave me a heads up. You just gave me a one-liner talking about 7 decisions, so I know we'll get to that as well. We are expecting a couple guests, so in the meantime, we are waiting for some of the people to join us on the show. Sure. If we get here, great. If we don't, we'll still continue on.
We'll rip it anyway. It's cool.
As scheduled. So let's just jump right into it. Let me just throw up something you sent me, and I'm looking forward to understanding what this is. And the cool thing is, of course, the whole point of this is that you know, Stephen, the people that interact with you on a regular basis have constantly said the same thing, which is that their experience with you is something that people have to. Can you expand on that just a little bit for everyone that's watching right now?
Yeah, and it's probably. I'm glad you've kicked it off in this way. One of the things is people are always trying to define their persona, trying to define their brand, trying to what message should I be putting out? And I sort of kind of press pause on all of that and say simply this: what is people's experience of the experience that is you? What is it? And do you know what it is? And on a couple of shows back, I elaborated on this. What is people's experience of the experience of you? Personally, professionally, romantically, spiritually, whatever it is. So in the context of what I did, the DeSede Angels, hi girls, they actually went through and looked at all of the different comments looking for the top words that people used to describe the experience of me, which is very humbling and very kind. And the words were inspiring, insightful, wisdom, great trainer, those very kind words. So when I released the podcast and this show with Peter called Inspiring Insights, I'm using people's words that describe the experience of me to present what I do. And when you do that, it's easy for you to embrace it. It's easy for you to engage it. It's easy for you to feel humbled by it, because don't shoot the messenger. Inspiring insights is what people say, and I'm proud of it. And I make a point every single day to do the best I can with it. So my message to everyone in business, in life, in relationships, whatever it is, what is people's experience of the experience that is you? That is your persona. That is your brand. That is your experience. That is your impact on someone else's humanity.
Wow, fantastic, fantastic. What a great way to kind of summarize what we're trying to accomplish here, which you
Yeah,
do accomplish by being here. So we appreciate that. I'm going to put
yeah.
up on the screen now some of the information that you sent, and
Whoops.
so
Go
so.
to the
Oh,
go
sorry.
very go all the way to the top one.
I'm so sorry. That's me.
No worries.
Sorry, everybody. It is live.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, yeah, perfection is fear in fancy dress. So not afraid of doing anything wrong. Kind of got a life degree in it. Everyone, the first episode that we did was about life foundations, and to scroll through these, Pete. The second episode talked about your dignity mandates. What's the signature of respect in the way that you act? And there was 6 elements to that. Last week we talked about people states, unlocking emotional behavior. So each show in some way is related back and building on the other. Today I wanted to talk to you about Andy Andrews' great book, The 7 Decisions, Life's Building Blocks. And I wanted to show you this. I hope you can see this. If you go full screen on this for a sec, Pete. On the 2nd of July, 2013, oops, I shouldn't show his name, my mentor and I actually went through a thing called the 7 Decisions. July 2nd, 2013. Here in Australia, and these were the Yoda diaries. These are 6 years of journals of me speaking to one of the single most influential human being in my life. And go back to the slides, Pete. So kind of funny, in Australia, I think it's still 30th of June in North America, but it's the 1st of July here, 2020. Tomorrow, 7 years ago, I was talking and learning about the 7 decisions. So they're what I call life building blocks. Next one, Pete, next slide. 7 is a cardinal number. I looked this up this morning. It's of prime importance. I looked up the definition of the word 7. I encourage you to start getting into the dictionary. So 7 is a cardinal number. It's of prime importance. And decisions is the act of making up your mind. So the 7 decisions is about priming your mind in the building blocks of life. Next one, Pete. Those 7 decisions start with having a decision around responsibility. The responsible decision, as Andy's book says, is the buck stops with me. Do you own your decisions in terms of what you're about to do in your professional life, in your personal life, in your relationship life? In the way that you had to go and actually homeschool your children, if that was applicable, the way you had to learn how to live and work from home. The buck stops with you, the responsible decision, number 1. Do you own the decisions in your life and take responsibility for it? Number 2, Pete. The guided decision. Do you seek wisdom? Don't have to change the camera, Pete. I actually spent 6 years from 11 o'clock at night till 6 a.m. in the morning speaking to someone in the southern states of America. And along that journey, I discovered, what do you do about seeking wisdom? Who is around you? Mentors, coaches, influencers. What information are you feeding into your life, personally, professionally, relationally, spiritually, that is guiding you to help make better decisions? Next one, Pete. And then the active decision. Have you decided to be a person of action? Is this you? Have you made a decision that the buck stops with you? You're going to surround yourself with right people, and you are going to be a person of action. Next one, Pete. And it doesn't matter about whether you've decided the buck stops with you. It doesn't matter whether you take action. It doesn't matter how many smart people have got around you. Have you created decisions in your heart that give you certainty about what you're going to do? Your commitments. And we talked about that in episode 1. What were the sacrifices you were prepared to make to complete what you want? What's the sacrifices in your life that you create certainty in your heart with? Or are you still playing the game of life in your head, determined by the ego's frailty of opinion? Next one, Pete. I love this one. Have you made a decision to choose to be happy with everyone every single time? What we call the joyful decision. Have you made a decision to choose to be happy? Or have you made a decision, going back to what I just said, to be so invested in the ego and fear and competition that you've actually lost sight of the fact that you've got one shot at this life, and it's a good idea to be happy with everyone every single time? Next one, Pete. I love this one because I think this is so important, because if you can't learn to have a forgiving spirit, you can't, and you don't have compassion in your life, if you haven't made the compassionate decision with feeling and meaning, with empathy, we talked about that in episode 1 as well. Have you created and are committed to a forgiving spirit in your heart towards yourself and for others? Next one, Pete. And then persistence. It doesn't matter how many smart people you've got around you. It doesn't matter how happy you've decided to be. It doesn't matter about how much wisdom, etc., etc. Have you decided to never quit on whatever it is you've decided to do? Have you decided to be persistent until you get it done and it never, ever ends? Last one, Pete. So the 7 decisions are about, have you taken the responsible, guided, active, certain, joyful, compassionate, and persistent decision to make those into the life's building blocks? Have you done that? Or are you still second guessing your responsibilities? Are you not seeking guidance from anyone, but you're seeking the guidance of someone else's opinion who you may not necessarily admire? Have you become inactive at being true to yourself because your uncertainties overwhelmed you? Have you created joy in your life, or are you totally consumed with the media's obsession of making us feel afraid? And do you have compassion towards yourself and therefore others, which makes it easy for you to be persistent? Most people's inability to be persistent and to never quit is because they never quit long enough in giving themselves a compassionate, joyful, certain, active, guided, responsible aspect to what they want to do with their life. So they're the 7 decisions. They're the life's building blocks. So if you do want to have a dignity mandate, which we talked in episode 2, how do you create a signature of respect in your life? Those 7 decisions are the way that you do it. So every single thing we do in the show, and I said this last week and I'll say it again, Peter and I's determination of the success of this show is dependent upon what you do in the next hour after you've left it, watched it, consumed 5 minutes of it. But if you take one thing away and activate it in the next hour, this show is a success. It's why I'm not particularly interested in just having a talking fest. I want people of expertise to come and join us and give ideas for people to be able to take one or all of those 7 decisions and make a difference in your life in the next 60 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow, Stephen, this is unbelievable. I'm like everybody else who's watching this now, or probably just saw that for the first time, because I want people to know this. I literally just saw this for the first time as well. And there's so much there to kind of dive into and so on. May I have permission to just to kind of jump around a little bit?
Yeah. Go for it.
One of the things that,
I'll keep the notes here.
Yeah.
Keep the notes here. Hang on.
No, absolutely. You know, one of the
and this is in honor of the fact that I only noticed this morning. Tomorrow, 7 years ago, I was writing this down in my journal, and I actually created 4 mentors, and I called them the Wisdom Council, because of the second decision was the guided decision. And in Andy's book, he talks about surrounding yourself with wisdom. So for about 6 years of my life, every week I spoke to 4 different individuals, and I called them the Wisdom Council.
Right. Well, mastermind, is that a fair statement? A mastermind?
Yeah, you could call it that. I mean,
that's the generic term. That's a generic term that people seem to use, or if your mentorship and things like that is.
Yeah, but it wasn't as if and that's fine. And I've got and full respect to those. I know Ash is very keen, very active, and very, very giving towards those. But these were 4 individuals I spoke one-on-one to. One was a military guy with 4 master's degree. I'd speak to him for 10 minutes because it was in and out and done. He'd ring me up sometimes when life was struggling, and he'd say to me, what type of guidance are you receiving in your life? Because I'd get a phone call from a guy who was military, and it was black and it was white. And he would say to me, Steve, go in the kitchen. I'd ring me up and I'd go, oh, how you doing? Go in the kitchen, get a glass of water, put cement in it, stir it, and harden the F up. And then he'd hang up. That was his advice. Then I'd speak to Bob, and I'd get on at 11 at night, and 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd still be speaking to him, taking notes. I had another gentleman who was in Europe whose childhood sweetheart was murdered 18 months into their marriage, and he helped me about courage. So I spoke to Spades about strength. I spoke to Bob about wisdom. I spoke to a guy called Wouter about courage. And then there was a consultant who's still in London And I would speak to Jay for about 25 to 40 minutes once a week. So one of them would be all night, one of them would be 10 minutes, one would be an hour, one would be 40 minutes. And Jay talked to me about value. So spirit, focus, courage, and value. They were the people that I surrounded myself with, enabling now people to say very kind things about what I did. But have you spent 6 years journaling the experience and wisdom of other people? And if you haven't, that's fine, but spend the next 5 minutes absorbing someone else who you admire.
Right. Wow. That, again, you wonder how many people can be blessed enough to have that many people that they can kind of, first of all, have a part of your life, and then be able to kind of pull the way you did individually. Yep. Each one of them can be in such a different manner. One of the things that jumped out of this process we just talked about, and I'll definitely bring them up as we go along here, but compassion was the one. That's probably fifth one down, I think it was, out of the 7. And
you can go back to the slides if you want.
Yeah, let me do that, because I think it's really important that some people might misunderstand, or maybe I'm not making myself clear. I want to make sure that I'm.
Go for it.
Let me get rid of some of that, some of those names there for us. Forgiveness.
Get rid of the inspiring insights overlay just for a second. Please.
Yeah, the what's amazing to me is this concept of forgiveness. And when you talk about compassion and the ability to bring compassion into your daily living, if you will, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your home life, that kind of thing, the idea of being compassionate, I've always believed it has a direct connection to the ability to forgive, and especially forgive yourself. Yeah. Now, I know for me that there's nobody harder on me than me. And for my mind, the inner voice that I hear speaking to me sometimes is just embarrassing, because it's so cruel sometimes to me, and it doesn't allow me to forgive myself for things that I've did, or decisions I've made, and they didn't either work out the way I wanted them, or something to that effect. Can you talk to a little bit about this idea that especially now? I mean, think about the world today. I mean, in the world today, especially with in the last 3 to 4 months, what we've been experiencing in the world in 2020, you can watch it play out all day long, on whether it's in social media, whether it's in the mainstream media, on television, and so on. There's a mood. There's certainly, and there's probably be more than one, but there seems to be a predominant mood, and let's face it, it's you have to go looking for compassion today. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not being done. I'm saying that the media, and certainly some of the social media and things so when we're not experiencing it and seeing it on a regular basis, it's, first of all, it's hard to apply to ourselves. But certainly how it ties directly to forgiveness is something that I'm really, really interested in understanding, some of your perspectives on that. Again, I struggle, and I think most people might agree that they struggle with forgiving themselves for some of the things they might have done or whatever. Yeah. So let me just jump in here and see some of the things you might have been mentioning to us here.
Yeah, just listening to what you were saying there, Pete. One of the things I say frequently, human beings at our core as a species are very competitive, we're very curious, and we're very compassionate, in that order. So we will fly, and I often say this when I mention this, we will fly to the moon back in the late 60s, which is pretty amazing back in those days, but we'll fly to the moon, which is a grey rock that you can't live on, stay there for however long Neil Armstrong, and come back, just so we can say we did it. So we're very curious, but our curiosity, we're what I call competitively curious. We're very competitive as a species. And that's very much around our ego and survival and all those types of things. Nothing wrong with it. Typically what happens, we start off with this, number one, we start off this with number 2, and we start off with this is a default. This is a default. This is activated when something happens. Right. An old lady or an elderly person falls in the street, we have compassion. Someone flies into a building, bless those people, we have compassion. The earth shakes and a tsunami races the day after Christmas Day and destroys and hurts and kills so many people, we have compassion. So when COVID came along, this actually jumped to the front, and all of a sudden we were very compassionate. Why? Because we were really curious about how we were going to be able to survive in isolation. The business of competing was pretty difficult now that we were working from home, not to mention the fact that we were competing against something when it started that was invisible, that we didn't know if it was another Black Plague.
Wow, so true.
So what happened is we got very compassionate and we went, put this at the front. So the other thing in the context of what you were talking about with forgiveness, human beings typically do two things. Or have got a choice, I should say, to do two things. You can be an example, and when you are, we call you an icon. Or you can be someone who just seeks, which is nearly everyone. So when people are constantly focused on just seeking opinion, seeking approval, seeking love, all of those things we talked about last week about pushing and pulling people away, when you're constantly seeking something from anyone, you have a tendency to push people away from you. As a result, if it doesn't work, you get really, really uncompassionate towards yourself, because all of a sudden your desire to seek becomes one of the biggest competitive things in your life. And imagine if you competed in your life to seek love every single day. Imagine if you competed every single day to compete by seeking someone's approval, which is an opinion. Do you think it would be really, 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 really easy to lack compassion to yourself if compassion is centered? Rachel Becks knows all about this, the lady who's all about love. Compassion is rooted deeply into your heart and the concept of love. Can you imagine if you spent all of your time seeking love from someone else and not yourself? And if you never got it, could you imagine how unforgiving you'd be towards yourself? If you want to know what that looks like, walk down the street after you finish watching the show and nearly everyone walking past you has a level of unforgiveness, a lack of compassion to themselves, because instead of being an example of love, of kindness, of forgiveness, they're seeking it from someone else. And sadly, most other people don't have it anyway. And if they do, we call them icons.
Now, you're not talking about icon as being famous now. And we're not.
No.
What do you mean?
Someone that you look up to.
What do you mean by icon?
Icon could be Mother Teresa. It could be someone famous. But you don't. Do you think of Mother Teresa as fame? She's well known.
Okay.
There's a difference between fame and celebrity.
Oh, bingo.
Bingo, big time. So when I say icon, people who are an example of the Mandelas, the Gandhis, I always go to those guys, Steve Jobs, those types of people. The people, I mean, I saw something on LinkedIn the other day about Keanu Reeves, that famous sort of short video of him getting up, a big movie star, big famous guy. Number one, he was on the subway. Didn't know those guys did that. Number two, he's giving his seat up and it's Keanu Reeves. And the reality is he's a cool guy and he does some beautiful things, makes some pretty cool movies. But he's a movie star, and you'd think that he's got the right to not even catch the subway, let alone give up his chair. But he has become an example of someone who can have celebrity, have fame, and be an icon about the compassion of offering his chair to a lady, which was lovely, who needed a chair on the subway, not to mention the fact that he drives a subway. And there's all kinds of other stories of his generosity and stuff, because he's an example. Yes, he's famous, but his fame is beyond his celebrity. Where there's other people who are celebrities, and I won't go into the naming of them, where you're not allowed to walk up to them at parties. You've got to go to their security, or you've got to go to their assistants before you can speak to them. You're not allowed to walk up to them and all that kind of stuff. He is an icon in the example of being compassionate, kind, with the curiosity, and he doesn't see competing. He just sees the competition of life being against himself.
Yeah, the competition part is what really jumps in there and really plays with your mind and really takes you in different directions. I mean, when you feel like it's kind of it reminds me of the idea of always feeling that you're, again, competing for things as opposed to being cooperative with people or being collaborative with people. Kind of like some of the things that we've talked about before, whether when you get together with people who are practitioners, how do you spend your time? How do you spend your professional time, your personal time, personal development, those kinds of things, as opposed to always feeling like you're in competition with somebody. Maybe coming around to the idea that you can be a little bit more compassionate about their journey as well, not just your own, but their journey as well. So yeah, that's fascinating stuff there.
But it goes back to that point, and everything you just said, you can play it down to everything you just said. To me, your life is an example. That's what life's all about. It's an example. Your life has been an example. Your decision, and the 7 decisions help with that, your dignity mandate, the signature of respect on how you enact, is basically What are the three things that you want to be an example in your life of? What are they? And you know what, going back to the opening remarks that you asked me about, what are people saying about the experience of you? Because that's your example. If people are saying that you're arrogant, unkind, rude, that's the example of their experience of you. In fact, that's their experience of your example. That's a better way of saying it. But if people are saying that you're inspiring, you're insightful, you're a great teacher, which is uplifting. If people are saying that, that's what your example is. And I'm proud of that because I try every day to do it. And Jane, and particularly Jane from the Angels, know how much I get it wrong. Sorry, gorgeous. I get it wrong sometimes. But I'm trying to be an example to inspire insightfully people and uplift them. My passion is your highest potential. So here's a point to everyone that's watching. If I had to ask you to go off and fill out the 3 words that people use to describe your example, because your example is their experience of you, what would it be? And I would encourage everyone to actually take that on and go and ask them. I know I keep saying this, it's something I say all the time. Your example is the way people experience you. And a lot of people, when I do say, go off and ask people about what's my impact on your humanity, a lot of people go, I'm a bit unsure as to, do you think I really want to know? Do you mean to tell me you conduct your life every single day and you don't want to know what people's experience of the way you conduct yourself? Get a grip and start asking yourself, what is the example that I set which creates an experience in everyone else? And if you're too afraid to ask, you need to start asking yourself some pretty good questions, beginning with, forgive yourself for making the assumption you're not that nice.
Yeah, to your point, I just want to jump on that. The asking part. I mean, let's face it. Who does that? I mean, I've not done that yet. We've talked about this. Way long. I can't remember in the past, and I remember some of the posts that you've had on LinkedIn and things like that to this effect of going and asking people what are their experience of you, and gosh, that's a vulnerable thing. That's really, you got to have some courage there and vulnerability there to do that. Or am I overthinking that?
No. Well, let's explore it, Pete. Why? What is vulnerable about asking, and I won't mention your partner's name, although thank you very much if you're watching for all the kind comments last week. I really appreciate it. If we were to speak to your life partner, for example, what would be the problem about asking her what the experience of you is? What impact you have on her?
Well, there's a powerful, now you're opening up something. Now here's why. But here's why. Because someone that's so close to you, really close, I'm gonna think obviously sees through some of the lenses, or sorry, some of the masks, maybe some of the perceptions that other people have. And I'm not now going into the world of being for authenticity. In other words, I'm one way with Stephen, but I'm another way at home.
No, I understand.
But it does certainly put you in that position when you start asking people. Now, if we were talking about professional, by the way, if we were just saying, go to your business partners and maybe the people that you work with on a regular basis and ask them what the experience is. I'm wondering, would that be different? Would it be different than as if what we're talking about, for example, is going out to somebody that is a little bit closer to you? I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas here because
that's cool.
Fascinating. It's fascinating to dig into those concepts, especially when it comes to vulnerability and asking people about the experience. But I love that because I think it's important that we all know that. I think it's important. It's important that we all have the courage to go out and ask these questions. Yeah, and again, for me, I know that it comes back to, I want to round it back to what we talked about earlier, compassion, and how it ties so closely to forgiveness and forgiving yourself, and that's part of it right there. Is like, I'm sure that my partner, my spouse, knows things about me that I'm certainly not going to broadcast to the world and feel really great about. As an example, and this is why I'm saying that the transparency and the vulnerability shows up in different places.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things to think of in terms of this, because everyone will sit back, and if there's one thing I've prided myself on in the recent past, and I don't know what the definition of that is being so absorbed to find out, in a positive use of the word self-absorbed, to find out what it is that and how it is that I help people. When people say, I've never met anyone quite like you, Steve, it's kind of difficult to market that. So one of the things that I've done is I've really explored what that means. And I encourage you to do the same thing. It's very easy or it's very hard. Life is very easy or life is very hard. So let's just take that as a simple. What's easy to do is what is easy not to do. What's hard to do is just not done. So let's start off by asking those 3 questions in your personal life. And just ask those 3 questions. So you could go to your partner and just say, hey, what's my impact on your humanity? What's kind of my authenticity? What do you like and dislike about me? What is the experience of me? And ask that question personally, because it's easy, it's safe. Then you could go in and actually seek some of the people who are colleagues of yours. And you could go and have that conversation with them and ask 3 of them, what's the experience of me? A little bit harder, but a lot more powerful. And then go to the most soulful and deeply, and you might think, well, isn't that the personal stuff? Go to the most soulful. So I would go to someone like Bob, my mentor. I'd go to someone like Jane, who's a mentor of mine also. I'd go and ask them, and I do almost every day when I speak with her, I go and ask them about what are the 3 things that I should be better at? What are the 3 things I could do better? I had lunch yesterday with one of my advisors, asking him the same question, Graham. I was asking Graham the same questions. So then you start having really profound conversations with people like Graham, some of the comments Graham said yesterday about some of the aspects of the show and what I could do better. But I listened to him, which is cool. So the end result is what you want to do is what are the 3 things people that you know, easy, professionals, and you could go for the people who are closer to you, easy. Then you go and have the Jane, the Bob and the Graham discussions that are harder. The Trevor discussions, they're harder. They press you because you've given them permission to do so. Then what you do is you pick out certain themes, and maybe it's 1, 2, 3 conveniently, and all of a sudden you've now got 3 key headlines about the experience that is you, personally, professionally, soulfully. And guess what? I guarantee there's going to be a common element because it's you just being you. Because if here there's a certain way you act, let's call it persona A, this is persona B, and this is persona C, at the core of you being a nice person, at the core of you being honest, the values. So if your values, for example, are compromised in B and C when you're soulful and professional, but your value in your personal relationship, all of a sudden you're out of balance. And when you're out of balance, it's really, really easy to be unforgiving to yourself. Most people are out of balance because they don't know the blend of the experience of them through all the elements of life. They're not going to ask the people that are close to them. They're not going to ask the professional people, and they're not going to go to those close, dear, soulful friends and say, give it to me.
Yeah.
I love the show. It's great. We're still building. We're still trying to get the audience right. We're still trying to get the whole thing blended the way we're doing it.
Sure.
So when I sat down with Graham yesterday over lunch, did I actually enjoy him telling me, he wasn't criticizing, he said there's some things you're doing you could do better. But
Right.
I trust him.
Sure.
I trust him.
Right.
Most people don't trust the opinion of others because they don't trust the opinion of themselves.
Oh. Wow. Yeah.
They don't.
Well, that's very true.
They don't.
Very true. Like as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, there's no stronger critic out there of me than myself. I'm the hardest person on myself, so there's no doubt about that.
Yes.
And I think that's common, by the way. I don't think it's unique to me. I think most people are struggling usually with the inner voice that's being commented on, the multiple voices in your head that are telling you what you can and can't do, and so on. You know, one of the things
I'm not being rude, everyone. I'm just trying to look down on the screen. You don't have to share it. I'm just going to the because I haven't got them written down here. But the active decision. Are you a person of action? What's the easiest thing to stop you in your tracks? Not have a go because I'm not doing it perfectly. Not have a go because someone might say that.
Right.
You know, I'm not sure what's happened today. We're supposed to have some people on the show. I don't know where they are, what's going on, or whatever. Apologies if they're listening in, or we've made a boo-boo, or whatever it's happened. I don't know, but you know what? We're still going to do the show.
Of course.
So to your point, Peter, a lot of the times people will actually say they will stop taking action. And you might have heard me say this. I think I said it earlier on the show. Perfection is fear in fancy dress. So some people justify that they're not going to do anything. They're not going to take action. The second decision, or the third decision, I'm not going to be a person of action. You know why? Because I'm too busy being concerned about whether I'm going to do it right.
Right. Very true.
And in a personal relationship, all of a sudden, your other significant other decides, I'm tired of waiting for you to do it right, and they leave. And then you realize I should have taken action, which goes back to that speak up and don't hesitate.
Right. Yeah. I want to jump around a little bit because I could stay on this subject quite a long time, because I'm passionate about the idea of forgiveness. I'm definitely I'm going to be going down that path in my own life. Just I have so many ideas about that as a documentary, as all kinds of different things. So I'm just putting it out to the universe already.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do it.
I'm going to jump back to another part of the program that you have brought to me here. So let me just get rid of that and clear that off there. Certain. When I saw that, have a decided heart and the certain decision. Now, wow, when you start using the word certain for most people, and I'll speak for maybe somebody listening right now, including myself, I'm calling for a friend about certain. Let's face it, that's a very powerful space and concept for people to be absolutely certain about something. I'm not talking about being stubborn and stuck on an idea or anything like that. I'm talking about the idea of certainty, and the fact that we're all looking for certainty in our lives. And of course we like uncertainty as well, because that's what makes things magical. I mean, certainly if we knew the outcome of everything, we'd be pretty bored pretty quickly. But what I like about the idea of talking about certainty is that it sounds like I have to be certain before I make a decision. So the certain decision. So in other words, do I have to be certain about the decision I'm making, or am I being challenged with the idea that I don't know what the decision is, and and the only way I'm going to be certain is actually making that decision. Let me use this word in another way, by the way. I love the idea. I love the word decide, by the way. I just love the word decide. And here's an example of it. A friend of mine who's in really, really good shape, I said to him one day, I said, how do you get that, the six-pack you have there? We all know what it is. Eat right, exercise, and all that kind of stuff.
Six-pack's the thing you buy at the bottle shop, isn't it?
That's me. Well, that's me. I'll tell you that. That's me. But I said to him, I said, how do you get that six-pack? Like, what do you do? And I was expecting him to list down a whole bunch of things he's doing. And you know what he said? He looked at me, he goes, decide. I said, what? He goes, decide. And I'll never forget that. I was thinking like he was going to give me an eating plan and how many sit-ups he does, or that he just says, decide. So in other words, he just said, yeah, just decide that you don't want to look the way you look anymore and just move on. I'm like, wow. So again, I'm fascinated with the concept of this, where you said the certain decision. And can you expand on that a little bit, maybe?
If you think of your friend, Mr. Six-Pack, and I'm sure he's a lovely guy, but if he's got a really good six-pack, I don't like him. But anyway.
and he's 50-something, which makes it worse.
Well, worse. What's there to like?
Oh, no, it makes it worse.
Good on him, bless him. If you make a decision and you have a sense of certainty, if you think of the concept of decision and certainty, another more elaborate way of saying that is a definitiveness of purpose. He's decided, whether he was, and I guarantee he's been like this all his life, he's decided with certainty that that's what he wants to look like. That's the physical health and well-being that he wants. That's what he's decided.
Right.
So, okay. Let's get the messages from people who are trying to get into the show. I'm not sure what's going on.
Trying to get into the show? I'm sorry. No, let's jump there for 2 seconds if you don't mind.
Sorry. Well, listen, why don't I answer that question? You can look in the background. One of the things is in terms of certainty, and one of the things in terms of decision, you'll make it. Here's a thought, right? And I know we think of bucket lists, but let's go past the bucket list. I wrote it down, and while Peter's doing what he's doing, I won't go to it, to the whiteboard. Here's the thing. Think of the concept of a bucket list. What actually is a bucket list? What is it? It's a certainty that you need to get some stuff done. So if you think of the movie with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, there was a bucket list because they knew with certainty the decision about their mortality had been made for them. So their certainty in their decision, which is what a bucket list is. So that's what we've decided a bucket list is, rather than it's driving Ferraris and going on fancy holidays. A bucket list is a collection of activities that you want to do because of the certainty of a decision of the mortality of your life. So if you think of the Freeman and Nicholson movie, they knew their time was up, so they decided they were going to go off and do what they did. And in the end of the movie, if you saw it, Morgan Freeman went back to his family because that was his ultimate bucket list. Beautiful. But if you think of the concept of a bucket list, it's everything to do with certainty. The only thing is, the certainty in the context of the movie, the decision was made for them. Neither of them wanted to pass away. Neither of them wanted to catch whatever the diseases they had. Can't remember what it is. But this gentleman in Peter's life, Mr. Sixpack, he has made a certain decision on the way he wants to conduct his life. And so it's easy for him to make a decision to just decide, because to him, it's just part of his life. There's a lady by the name of Mary Bacon who's very, very fit and healthy and of a similar age. Mary's just made a decision that the way she eats, the way she exercises, the way she conducts her life, that's just what she's going to do. And as a result, she looks like she's 20 in terms of her physical shape and her health, and beautiful lady. But she's just made a decision that that's her lifestyle choices. Too many of us, and this includes me, have made lifestyle choices because of the uncertainty of what's going to happen tomorrow. And then we say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that because it needs to be perfect.
Right.
What does that mean?
Right. Yeah. See that, and that's the point of my questioning that is that the idea of the certain decision, the decision. So when you say certain decision, of course, you're saying here. Let me just bring it back up on the screen so everyone can see.
Mm.
I have a decided heart.
Yes.
I mean, you're going a little, obviously, heart, certainty, decision. I mean, most people don't. Well, I shouldn't say that. I was just going to say I was going to say something that's just obviously not true, which is I was going to say most people do not make decisions with their heart. It's actually quite the opposite. Maybe people are doing it with their brains or doing it with their hearts.
Yep.
But I was getting back to this point here where you said I have a decided heart. But getting back to Sixpack, the idea of deciding to do something like that versus deciding, what the commitments you're making in your life, the kinds of conversations you have, how you spend time with people and so on, could be a little bit different, obviously, for everybody. So anyway, it's fascinating to me that this concept is jumping out to me the way it is, and maybe some other people can drop us after they hear this and share.
Pete, if you send, I've just sent you the email because Annie's just sent me another email. Sorry, everyone, but Annie's just sent me an email address. If you send it to there, put the slide back while you do that, and I'll answer your question. I was listening. If I wasn't, I'd tell you to stop. So I was listening. Having a decided heart. And this is the issue in terms of people have a lot of egotistical decisions based on their mind. But then when you think of Mr. Sixpack, you think of Mary, for example, even Annie, who we're hoping to come back on the show shortly. These are people who have made a decision in their heart about with certainty what they want to do. So, and Annie will probably tell more of this, and God willing, she'll get on the show. In Annie's case, she had twins, then she had another child, then she had twins. So in the space of, 2 or 3 years, Annie went from just her and her husband, James, to a household of 7, just like that. But during that period, she still was a CEO. She still was a very productive businesswoman back in the day when it was probably frowned on a little bit, and she may add to that if we get her on. But Annie made a decision in her heart that she was going to be a successful businesswoman, and she is to this day. CEO of Glaucoma Australia, runs her own consultancy. But even going back a few years now, when she was a mum raising her family and she had this family at speed all at once, twins, single and a twin, boom, 5 children, she had a heartfelt decision that she was going to be a successful businesswoman, a successful CEO, and an extremely successful mum and wife. And she is. And now she's a grandma, which is wonderful. She, in her heart, had made that decision, because if she stopped long enough to decouple her heart and get straight and simply focused on the mind, She would have had the egotistical conversations in her head driving away from the school run when other mothers were saying, well, you shouldn't be working, you should be at home. Back in the day when it was not politically incorrect to say those things as it is now. But Annie decided that she was going to be a working mum and she was going to be a CEO and she would juggle all of that stuff. We call it work-life. It was called work-life balance back then. It's now called work-life blend.
Wow. Okay.
Because work-life balance was, back in the day, I'd get up in the morning and I'd be at home. I'd commute to work. I'd be at work. I'd commute home, and then I'd be at home. Today, we get up in the morning and we're consuming and perhaps having a conversation or text back and forward whilst we're shaving. We're in the doing our makeup, ladies. Pardon me. We're in the train, which is a virtual office. If we actually get on the train, obviously a bit different these days. Then we get to the office. Then we're heading back home and we're still working. There's a blend across everything we do. So 20 years ago, when Annie was doing a school run, it was wrong it was perceived as wrong that a mother could be doing a school run while she's working. Today, they're sitting waiting for the kids on the school run, doing a marketing call on Zoom that could be worth $500,000.
Absolutely.
And Annie was doing that 20 years ago because in her heart, she decided, I am going to be a successful human being. She's a woman, a beautiful lady at that. I'm going to be a successful wife, a successful mum. I'm going to be a successful CEO. Now she's a successful example of what it is to live a majestic and practical and powerful life.
Wow. And that's so true. I mean, the whole idea of bringing the heart into that part of that decision making, right? And being able to, again, you're bringing together. I struggle. That's why you hear me struggle with language wise, bringing together the brain and the heart to make a decision, and juggling all the things that you take into account to make that decision. There's very little certainty for me sometimes that happens because my brain might be pulling one way, my heart might be pulling another. And of course, and then you have to decide what counsel you're listening to and so on. I did send the email just so you know, so we're waiting for a guest to join us right now. And so it's all.
And by the way, everyone, it looks like I'm a huge fan of Annie. I'm a huge fan of anyone, going to Peter's point, that has made a decision of certainty based on their heart. And they've had to face challenges. So even though we're trying to get Annie on the show and everything, one of the things I'm talking about is I'm using her as an example. But the example is she has certainty in her heart. And most people have doubt in their mind, because the mind is the ego, and the ego's job is to actually protect you. And the ego's job is to flood you with fear if it's unsure of what's wrong. So and there's all the amygdala and all that type of stuff, but you're walking down the road and there's a squiggly little piece of rope on the floor, and you're walking along and you see it and you jump back, making the assumption, amygdala activates, making the assumption that you're in fear. And thank God it does it, so it protects us. You take a step on and you might incorrectly be using your headphones or being on the phone, and you step onto the pavement and go onto the roadway, and oh my God, thank God it does that.
Yes.
But what it also does is steps into those parts of your life where you don't speak up and hesitate. When your loved one is standing right there, go, love me back. When a colleague of yours is going, lead me. When someone walks into your office professionally and wants you to actually validate them because they've tried their best. Cheyenne is a lady that I kindly live with, Graham's partner. She started a new job just before COVID, and she tried and she tried and she tried, and they weren't particularly respectful of what she was doing. And the great pride is at the end, when she just recently started a new job in the last couple of days. When she had the opportunity to just resign and leave, she stayed to help them with handover. And that's great, because she'd made a decision in her heart that just because they were going to be disrespectful in the beginning, she was going to leave with dignity in the end.
Oh, I love that. Keeping the dignity part. I love that.
Yeah.
I got a really good piece of information for you right now, Stephen. We have Annie Gibbons here to just join.
She made it.
That's what I love about live. I love technology. I love the fact we're throwing emails around, we're doing stuff, and it's just awesome. Anyway. This is why I love doing this show, because we just don't know what's going to happen. So let's just see if I could bring my magic in here right now. And there is finally, I got Annie Gibbons. I'm sorry I sent it to 17 other emails. So everybody out in the world right now, Annie Gibbons, if that's your name out there, I apologize.
And Annie, I know, I'm
Yes.
not sure how much of the show you've heard. Hey, gorgeous. I know with certainty it wasn't our fault.
That's all right. I accept it. I fall on my sword. I'm sorry. I'm just having one of those days. It must be me. Technology is not working in my favor. So apologies. But anyway, here we are now.
We're here.
Let's celebrate that. And
absolutely. Well, I've given you the greatest rap in the world. And the reality is, everyone that's listening, and I'm not sure how much of that Annie actually heard, but creating certainty, the whole show is about the certain decisions and about the 7 decisions. And one of them is to actually have certainty and to act out of your heart. And I was just explaining, and just a quick recap, that when you had twins, a single child and twins, and all of a sudden the family went from you and James to 7 just like that,
yes.
You were still making the decision to be a successful mum, a successful wife, a successful CEO, a successful business person. Back in the day when it was frowned upon. Today it's not. And the reality is it shouldn't have been frowned upon then either. But Peter was asking me about this whole aspect of certainty, and it's having a decided heart. And one of the things that I admire about you, Annie, is you have a decided heart. So your endeavours to actually be an asset and an aid to transform women today is something that's got 20, 30 years of experience. It's not as if, oh, good, I can be an entrepreneurial woman today. And God bless all of those ladies that are diving into it, because they now feel confident that the community will accept that. You were actually doing it when everyone's saying you should be at home.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But anyway,
absolutely. It's been an interesting
journey. Can you jump on the call with us, Pete?
Sure.
Because I'd like to just include this. One of the things, everyone, we're doing on the show is we're not 100% sure what the best way of doing this is, apart from this one thing. And I'll say it over and over and over and over and over again. If at the end of watching this show, you haven't got something to take away in the next 60 minutes, we've failed. And as given Annie's part of the family of Inspiring Insights, and she's a Sede family member and global guest, if between Peter, Annie and I, we don't give you something from this conversation that goes forward with Annie for you to put into practice in the next 60 minutes, the 3 of us have failed. That's the only certainty I have. So one of the things Annie's doing is she's in the process of launching a book. Are we intending Inspiring Insights to be a product and a placement promotion? No, we're not. But I know Annie's intention is to help and serve people, and that fits in with what Peter and I are. I know Annie's all up for the next 60 minutes, not in the next 60 minutes with us, but as soon as someone hangs up, I know Annie wants them to have a difference by what they've heard here. So Pete, that's part of what we're doing today, is just allowing Annie to give us some insight into this autobiography. I was kindly interviewed on it as well by Dawn, which was lovely. So Annie, do you want to just speak to that? And Pete and I will just put some questions together, and if I get on the whiteboard, I will.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that opportunity. And it was great to have you, Stephen, involved in being interviewed for my biography, because it's the whole purpose of, how do we see ourselves? I thought of that, do an autobiography, and I went, no, that's just one distorted view. It's really amazing at this stage of my life to be able to have other people interviewed and to be able to get that learning actually to how they see you or see me in this situation, to actually get this collective view of who you are and how you are received, because ultimately, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about how we are received by others, is actually our true being, rather than these distorted realities that we have in our mind. And so as Stephen said, I've been going through this amazing journey of actually having the biography written, and the biography will be called Becoming Annie, a biography of a curious woman. And it is, as Stephen said, referred to, I have always been curious. I've always been like, what if you could do this or do that? And so for me, all the chapters will be called, becoming a wife, becoming a mom, becoming a CEO, becoming an entrepreneur, becoming empowered to actually know my true essence. It'll be many, many chapters of becoming, and I think that will resonate with pretty much women globally. Of we're all wrestling with this. How do we do life? How do we get it all? And the topic today of certainty. I've been looking at all those different stages of my life. I always had a certainty of what is my true potential. I used to to have these sort of daydreams of, I'd love to be a businesswoman. I'd love to empower others. I'd love other women to help women, because I found many opportunities, in many situations that didn't happen. And I was really saddened by that. And so as I did my journey, and as you said, Stephen, some of it's actually been really hard. I haven't been sort of empowered along the way through my journey of growing my career and juggling that around a very large family. But with that, I've never taken that as a hurt. I've been disappointed, and it's actually really driven that sense of desire for me to actually go, women can do this better. Society can do this better. How do we get a situation where we can, be great mums, be great partners, be really amazing in our work situations, and actually just, live and breathe in our truth in a better way.
Annie, if I could ask you, because it's interesting, you say, how do we see ourselves? And you mentioned the word curious. And earlier in the show, I said that human beings are three things. We're curious, competitive, and we're very compassionate. But curious and competitive by nature, compassionate by trigger. So someone fires in the building, the tsunami happens, an elderly person falls in the street, the COVID thing happens, and all of a sudden we get compassionate. And all of a sudden, the first wave of the experience of COVID was confusion and compassion. It was too hard to be curious because we didn't understand. It was hard to compete against something we couldn't see. So we all got compassionate towards each other. Now, all of a sudden, we've now gone back to curious and competitive. It's all get the dogs out and stuff. You said something that I'd like to ask you. You said about CEO, mum, wife, woman, entrepreneur, becoming. Can you just, for anyone out there who is a CEO, whether it's a guy or a girl, mum or dad, wife or husband, woman or man, entrepreneur covers both. What are the top three things, Annie, if I had to ask you, if you look over that part of your whole life, including now, is there a common set of characteristics about becoming a mum, going from you and your husband to 5 children, hey James, to becoming an entrepreneur, to becoming a CEO? Was there any common characteristic of the three things that your go-tos, whether you consciously did it or not? So if anyone's listening out there who wants to become a mum, wants to actually take the step to CEO or professionalism, wants to take the step to being an entrepreneur, or just wants to be a better husband, wife, brother, son, boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, of all the things that you've done, is there a common go-to 2 or 3 things that make Annie become?
I think it has to, for me, it has to have been purpose driven. So for me, understanding what my purpose is, what do I actually want to achieve? So I'm a person who actually goes from what do I want the outcome to be? What do I want the results to be? And then I work backwards rather than this is a really good idea. I'll see where it goes. I very much want to say, what's in my heart? I'm very heart driven. So for me, at the moment, I'm also CEO of an eye health charity because I'm heart driven. I want to see people saving sight every day. I work with women day in, day out in my mentoring program because I want to actually see them achieve the hopes and the dreams and the outcomes that they want. So I suppose becoming a CEO, becoming an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter. It's actually, well, what are you wanting to achieve? What's driving you? What is your purpose? What do you actually want to receive from that and to give from that? I actually see more and more the longer I'm in things, I actually go, am I living in am I progressing in my true purpose, but what am I also then giving back? So I think that's a big thing. Probably the second biggest thing is intentional. I think we talk a lot about intent, but for me, it's intentional actions. Intent to me means that you intend to do something, you want to do it, it's a good idea, but so many people don't. And so a lot of my journey has actually been looking at, well, what intentional actions do I put in place to be able to achieve that? So it wouldn't matter if I'm in a boardroom or if I'm the CEO of the charity or the founder and organizer of my business. I could actually look at the evidence and go, well, where is all the intentional action that allows me to strategically and compassionately achieve what I'm trying to achieve?
Pete, go down to the board for a sec because I'm loving this, and go full just for Annie, for everyone's sake. Annie, what you've said, and I've gone step 3, step 2, step 1. The first step, and if this is today, so this is now, given what you've just said, love this, your purpose is the target, which is the very first thing you do. So you're standing over here, and the first thing you do is step forward into the future state of what's my purpose? That's the target. Then you
Yes.
take the second step, which is coming back towards where you are today, is you set out a map of intentional action, which is your second step.
Yeah.
Where
And
most people are trying to work out what the next thing to do is, and Annie Gibbons actually works out what the target is, what the map to get there. So if you've got the purpose, which is your target, the intentional actions, which is your map, what's kind of the first thing you do as you come, or the third thing you do based on the first thing, which is purpose and target? So this is my target purpose. This is my map, the intentional actions. What's the very first thing you do that you have applied to everything you've done? Which includes going from a husband and wife to 7 people in the family in 2.5 years.
Pretty crazy. For me, it's all about what is my core. You know, what am I passionate about? And it's going to come down to my values, my drivers. So it's all of the core being, who am I, and what resonates with me, and what do I achieve? So whether I was, becoming a mom, and I had 4 kids in 2 years. So I sprung into childhood parenting with 2 sets of twins. But I also knew that I valued family. I valued becoming a mom. You know, I did have more than expected suddenly, but that didn't actually change that core desire. I knew at an early stage that, I'm a mum, but I also want to grow my career, and I wanted it to be in an area that would make a difference. I knew that because of my values. I wanted to, I'm a person who wants to leave a big footprint and to be proud of what I've achieved, but also have taken other people on that journey and be able to leave a legacy that my time on this planet made a difference. And so I think my understanding what my values are, and understanding what my beliefs are, and then going to that core of my essence, I think that's really important. I think by that though, if you start there, and this is where I probably did it a lot more in my earlier days, I went and said, I love that. I'm passionate about that. I value that. And I could get bogged down in that area. And then you make a lot of decisions and then act. And you can kind of go off too broad, I suppose.
Cool.
And that's been my downfall, because I kind of have everything. And the reality, now I'm a lot more focused.
Hang on to that thought for a second, Annie, and go to full screen on this for a sec, Pete. And please hold on to that thought. Your target is your purpose, which is the very first thing you do. So you're standing here on the road of life, and the very first thing you do is your purpose, which is your target, step 1. You then look at the intentional actions, which is your map, which is step 2. And then you rely on your values, your beliefs, your essence to create a sense of significance. Cool?
Correct. Yes. Cool.
Bring back to the 2 of us again, Pete. One of the things that's really, really cool, Annie, is something that I think everyone struggles with, and God knows I have, and you know that, even though there's a lot of stuff, you know a lot about me, but there's a lot of stuff you don't know about me. One of the things is, and Peter was talking, Pete, come onto the screen, get rid of the whiteboard for a sec. One of the things Pete and I have been talking about whilst we've been killing time waiting for Annie, one of the things Peter and I were talking about was the whole concept of certainty. So when you talk about your value, beliefs, essence, and that first step, what you just said, which is the thing I wanted you to stay with, is you did it as well, and you made the mistake. And I would imagine a lot of people do it. It's that thing about you're trying to get so certain around values, beliefs, essence, and exploring all the options that the end result is you lose sight of your target. You actually forget where your map is, and you become consumed in the never-ending circle of certainty and uncertainty, and the dance of doubt, the dance of distraction, and the dance of definition that I'm busy. And whenever people say to me, Steve, you won't believe how busy I am, I go, God, you must be getting a lot done. And that look on their face when you say that is the real reason they're not getting anything done. So Annie, my question to you, how did you overcome diving into the values and the significance and the essence? And because people can go on and on and on about their values, and they need to, but how many people are so certain about what their value is, but if you ask them what their purpose and intentional map is, they can't tell you?
Yeah.
How did you overcome that, Annie? Because you admitted that you got stuck in it. So how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I overcame it by getting clarity about, okay, let's pick 1 or 2 things, So I'm a super passionate heart warrior, and I get excited about lots of things. So I want to do everything all the time, and then that blows out exponentially. And so I used to get stuck down tunnels. I used to just spend so much time. I'd get to burnout. I just be exhausted because I wanted to say yes to everything. I wanted to be a good person. I wanted people like me, and I also went, well, what does it take? So I want to do everything plus us more. Whereas my learning has actually been, don't be so hard on yourself. Actually pick, if you're looking at your values, just pick your first two, because ultimately that's what will drive you, or your interests. Just pick one or two and do them really well, And so I suppose an example of that was when I first started my business, I actually went, oh yeah, I'm available to do mentoring and coaching and speaking and business and life. And it's kind of like, what? And then what I've actually learned is just do one thing. I empower women to, thrive in their circumstance, to go to the next level now. And then how do I do that? Through a program, which is so tailored and organized and scalable, and I can be focused. And so I've found that my focus on actually knowing what I want to do clearly and just do that really, really well. And also focusing on the outcomes, and not just outcomes for me. It's not all, a lot of people will be thinking it's the money or the security, or well, what are you actually having more time thinking and about, for me, it's about the feelings. How do I feel when I'm what I consider successful, which is actually achieving the end goal, and balanced and happy. And more importantly, how does the person that I am here for, how do they feel? And so when we focus on that, those feelings that identify where the success has actually happened, then I think I can spend more time there, and it's easier. It's actually not exhausting. It's quite fun. It's super fun, actually.
Yeah, it's funny for everyone. Annie and I don't know, 18 months ago when I came into Sydney, and I just got into Sydney, and Annie and I got together in a hotel function room that some kind folks here allowed me to use. And we had probably 3 panes of windows that were about 12, 13 feet apart. It was huge. And going to Annie's point, we literally mapped out all the things Annie can do, and we filled an entire mirror, and it was just like, holy cow. So that was funny. So it's very interesting that how much you've gone focused on that. So
and that was a really profound moment, Stephen. So just so that your audience knows that. So Stephen actually was so fundamental in the change of becoming Annie. And I have to shout this out to you, Stephen. So at that stage, I have my business, which is still my business, Lipstick Consulting. But I was all about what can Lipstick Consulting do. And actually, Stephen, by mapping this crazy life of Annie out on his whiteboard, actually then showed me, Annie, you're the brand. Annie Gibbons was the brand. And I changed my website to anniegibbons.com. And I then went and said, I'm now writing a biography, Becoming Annie. And now my business has skyrocketed because I suddenly realized this truth that I was the brand. I was the product in a way. I was actually helping people because of who I was. Whereas I used to hide behind that. I used to go, oh no, I can provide like services. And so that to me was a huge learning, that actually back yourself, be bold, step into that new space. And now certainty wise, I've got 100% certainty that I'm in that right place in my business and life. But I was confused on that day. I didn't know where to go next.
I mean, my mentor Bob used to say to me, Steve, you'll get trapped in your talent. Because you can teach people how to do videos, you can teach people how to do speaking, you can motivate and inspire people. And he in typical Bob fashion, he'd just drill it all the way down to a sentence where he'd just say, or even a couple of words, you get trapped in your talent. And the reality is, Annie, it's a lovely place to be, trapped in your talent, rather than go, I'm in a box, where's my talent? Oh my God. So you can get trapped in your talent. And I just wanted to come back to a couple of things that you said, which was really cool. And I'm going to say these, and I want you to respond back. You said burnout, and I put against it, acknowledge burnout. And you also said prioritize, and I thought a really cool way of prioritizing, Annie, is you also mentioned, not that you said it at the same time, but if you're feeling a sense of burnout because all of a sudden you've lost your target, lost your map, and you're just consumed in this bit, you're overwhelmed with choices, you've got all of these things you can do, you might be trapped in your talent. First thing is acknowledge your burnout and be conscious of it. Want to ask you about that. Second thing is prioritize, take your eyes off you. I thought that was really cool. And over here, just a few seconds ago, you said provided services, which is to others. And it's interesting that the outcome, one of the things about Annie, for those that do know her and those who are now meeting her today, Annie's outcome is it's why I love her to bits, and we call her a Sede heart warrior. Annie's outcome is focused on you. So Annie, tell me a little bit about the burnout and acknowledging it, because sometimes you can get on the wheel and not even realize you're burnt out. And the angels right now are all laughing in the Philippines going, yes, Steve. Tell him, Annie. Tell him, Annie. Tell him, Annie.
Oh man, I've been burnt out so many times. Like, to be honest, I've had times.
So what did you do? What did you
What
do?
did I do? What did I do? It was painful, to be honest. It was really painful getting to these moments of, oh my gosh, like even physically, my body was burnt out. I'd have, neck problems or just, extreme exhaustion or tiredness, or I'd be overly emotional. And what did I do? I actually went, enough. Is this worth it? This was where the revelation was. I was too focused in what I was doing and trying to be the very best at it. I had this 100%. You have to be 100% at everything. And so what did I do? I actually then went to going, that's what balance is about, right? It's like, okay, well, how am I going to sway my time and my energy? And the collective is the 100% of me. I don't have to be 100% because all those hundreds were just exhaustion. So I then, I had to work out what my balance was in that time and also to be aware it will shift, it will change. Like we were talking about before, my values and my beliefs and all that sort of stuff, it has changed so much and developed and refined over the years. And the same thing about our balance and our time and our energy, to realize that is fluid. And particularly as a woman who's becoming a mom and juggling career and university and, marriage and a home, like all these things. Of course it's going to change. We've got to realize that we're in the flow and you've just got to go with the flow. So I was too resistive of, I have to do everything perfectly. And now I realize that, you've got 100% of your time and energy and purpose and passion. Where should you be spending your energy and time at this?
Annie, if we're talking to someone, the first, and I don't have kids, as you know, Annie, and stuff, but I'm just thinking that as a mum and as a dad, but particularly as a mum, I assume, and I don't have any experience in this, but what you just said about not being able to do 100% of everything, I did some work for a doctor and did some filming with a whole bunch of new mums, and I was filming and they were all forgot that I was there, and some of the stuff they were talking about that ladies talk about what happens to your body, I was blushing all the time because I just
crazy.
But the interesting point about what you just made is, and we guys could probably learn big time from you ladies, is that when you're trying to run just a home, forget about whether you've got a job and CEO. If you're just trying to run a home with that many kids, you must get really good at knowing how to max out on 80% or 50% is enough.
100%. One, I've learned every corner to be cut. I tell you what, my home life was like army level training of, just making everything as lean and as manageable and as efficient as possible. So very much learned what you don't need to cut. I now call it just noise, clutter, and I've very much had that 80% rule. Where is 80% enough for me? And so this is where the perfectionist has a lot of problems, and I've learned to tone that down rather than go for 100%. Because if you're at 100% and then life happens, which lets me tell everybody, when you've got two sets of twins under 26 months, life really, really happens. And it's that 20% that you need for your wiggle time. So now when things are great in business, I use that 20% for what I call my sprints. I've got time and energy to go, I'm going to really smash something out. I mean, I'm doing a biography at the moment. I might be writing a book. I'll be writing a new module. I'll be preparing for events. I need that 20% to, one, use as me time to refuel and re-energize. And I also need it as contingency because of life. And that's allowed me, that's been the game changer for me, that I go, I'm happy with my 80%, whereas I used to focus on the 100%. And that's it. When you're doing that, and then, 4 kids have chicken pox, or, you suddenly thought something was due at work in a week and now it's due tomorrow, the whole thing just gets unraveled. And, none of us want to be in that space.
No, it's great. Annie, I want you and I'll orchestrate this. I want us to have a conversation. I want you with my assistants to have a conversation, and sorry about the board going crazy, everyone. I'm just trying to, these are my notes more than me trying to present something to you. Annie, I want to have a conversation with someone out there, guy or girl, who's suffering from burnout. And I want you to help describe what the emotional, physical, and spiritual characteristics of burnout is, if you don't mind me asking that. So we want to talk to Joe, Jenny, Peter, Tracy, whoever it might be that's out there, and they're just made up names, by the way, and hello to whoever those people are, bless you. Annie, emotionally, when you're in burnout, so people because when you're in burnout, you've got to acknowledge it. And in many times, people don't even know what it is. And I can hear all the angels going, tell him, Annie, tell him. Emotionally, Annie, if you are emotionally burnt out, what are some of the characteristics of it?
First of all, being hypersensitive. So yeah, you're so exhausted and got so much on, like anyone can do anything. Like, and it's just
three things for each one, Annie.
Yeah, sensitive. Okay. So hypersensitive, cry easily, and very reactive.
If you're in burnout, Annie, physically, what are some of the three? Just stay with Annie because my board looks like a nightmare.
Yeah, exhaustion.
Okay.
So physically exhausted. You can have physical pain, and just you can even feel nauseous. You can feel a tightness. So often a lot of neck problems.
Get down into that. So when you say exhausted,
so physically with that exhaustion, it's just so tired, so hard to think straight. Your whole neck and shoulders. My neck and shoulders used to go out all the time, and so it's like this. Obviously, this tension. Your gut. I think there's more and more understanding now for me of your gut just shows you're just not well. You can get sort of cramping and just kind of like, oh, I'm just sort of all tied up. That's where that tied up in knots comes from, I suppose. People, you can sometimes, just come out in, I've seen, even myself, you can come out in rashes. Also, it's an overwhelming thing.
Talk to me about, and finally, Annie, talk to me about if someone out there, and yes, Graham, if you're watching, given our lunch yesterday, Graham's going to be sitting there. Steve, are you taking note of this? Spiritually, yes, I am, Graham. Spiritually, Annie. And this spirituality could be even in context of your relationships with the kids, with James, all that kind of stuff, if you don't mind touching on that, if you wish, if you don't need to. Spiritually, and getting right down into the characteristic of what someone might be sitting there going, oh my God, you're right. Like hypersensitive right now, the angels know that. Jane knows that. For me right now, they know that. So spiritually, in whatever that definition is for you, what are three characteristics, right down to something that people can almost feel and embrace rather than sort of some hairy-fairy words? When you were burnt out spiritually, and that's not religion, that was just, you know what spirituality is, or spiritual. What were some of the things, if you take yourself back as you're doing right now, to that period of acknowledging burnout? We've talked about emotional, sensitive, easy to cry, reactive. Physical was being exhausted and tired, pain in the neck and shoulders, even nauseousness and around your gut. And Rebecca Chan in Perth will be loving that. Spiritually, what were three of the things that if you said those out loud now, anyone who's listening to this or watching it will go, oh my goodness, because we're trying to help people to acknowledge their burnout.
Yeah. I think spiritually, I just didn't feel... I think for me, a spiritual relationship is actually feeling a calm or a sense of belonging in the world, in the planet, and having this connection. And so when I was suffering burnout, I just suddenly felt sort of alone and disconnected and felt like I didn't fit. It's like this existential, surely, all of, whether you're believing in God, well, I couldn't feel and touch God anymore. I felt, if it's in your family and like, oh, they're not getting me. I'm not sort of fitting. I felt withdrawn and not connected. So I felt like I detached from a sense of energy, and that made me feel very lonely. And it makes you more emotional, but it felt that loneliness and that disconnectedness, and I felt that, for me, that spiritual connection, whether it's, with the land or different energies and so forth, actually, gives you a sense of empowerment and gives you, joy and happiness. And so when I didn't have that sort of in my sense that spiritually, I actually kind of felt so flat and alone and de-energized.
And if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to go here, but in the context of your relationships as a mum, your relationship and your marriage and stuff, when you're suffering burnout, what are some of the characteristics of that? And you can be as deeper and as high as you want. So I'm not trying to pry, but if someone's out there experiencing burnout and we're trying to help them to acknowledge it, and they're wondering why their relationships aren't working, or they're wondering why there's a detachment or whatever, could you speak to that? Because I think it's really important.
Oh, absolutely. So what would it look like? You know, from a wife, it could be even to the point of, you know, I actually don't want to have physical intimacy. I don't want to be connected. I just can't cope. It's just another thing. It's another, you know, so you're distancing yourself in the relationship. For if you're, you know, your kids are wanting just normal issues, when you think about it, going, yeah, why did I snap at them? Why am I cranky at them? Why did I burst into tears because they, you know, said I was fat or old or something, you know, something crazy. When we actually look at it, they're little things that every kid goes and says, you know, why are you this? And they just say things as they are. So when am I, and often when you're in that stage, you kind of don't get the perspective of, you know, but if the listeners could actually now go, yeah, when have I, you know, flown off the handle and, you know, yelled at one of the kids or smacked them, or, you know, told them that, you know, gone off on a rant, or just burst into tears or whatever. And then what was happening at that time, and if it happened to someone else, would it sound reasonable, you know? And so it is hard when you're stuck in it, but I think yeah, definitely. Or it might even be that you're not. So it can be that hyperreactivity, or the other side is the distancing. I know they've been calling me. I'm not going. I don't care. And I remember those times. It's almost like, can I just hide in my bedroom? You know, someone's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And you're like, they're acting like, do you not hear me? It's like, I hear you. I just don't want to do anything, because it's all of it is an extra. It's like someone needs me more. And when you don't feel like you have something to give, all it is then a shutdown, and it's like you go into survival mode.
Okay. Jennifer, thanks for your comment. I appreciate it. Jennifer, if you've got a question for Annie, pop it down in the comments. And Graham, same with you. I appreciate, and I knew Graham actually wrote while you were chatting, yes, I am, Steve. So, because he was talking to me about a lot of elements of this yesterday, which was really cool. Pete Jewett, so if you've got some questions, Jennifer, for Annie. And Annie, can you quickly say hello to Lou and wish her, Angel Lou, and wish her mum well, and thank you for the glaucoma advice.
Oh, absolutely.
And Peter, can you jump on? It's Angel Lou from the Sede Angels.
Hey Lou, I'm so glad that Stephen connected you with me, and so yeah, send your mum to Glaucoma Australia. We'll happily help her on her journey. And if you've got any questions whatsoever, just contact me directly. Really happy to support you.
And that's motivated by Lou's mum from the Sede Angels, but it's applicable to everyone. So one of the joys of what Annie does in one element of her amazing life is actually help people have sight, and I think it's beautiful. So any questions, Jennifer? Thanks for the amazing comment. Appreciate it. Same with you, Graham. Pete, have you got any insights on this? Because I've really wanted, and Annie, the only thing I knew was Annie was going to talk about the book, and Annie knew that if you talk to me, I'm going to try and find takeaways for people. She just knows that. If you come near me, she's going to give me a hug, and we're doing takeaways. So thanks, gorgeous. I appreciate it. Have you got anything, or what's your reflections on this, Pete? Because you've always got some clever insights on things.
No, I was just really listening, and because we focused a lot right there on burnout, and to me, and I'm just thinking that I wasn't putting that together with necessarily some of the decision making things. So I must say, I was listening and I was taking it in a much different context of what we started out just chatting about a little bit, but to the point of like you said,
take us to there, because one of the things I noticed was and don't go to the board, Pete. One of the things I noticed, please. One of the things I noticed was burnout. People don't acknowledge it. And if you can't acknowledge you're burning out, you don't have certainty. You don't have decisions. You certainly don't have your map with your internal actions, to use Annie's beautiful life case study. You certainly don't have your purpose and your target, to use Annie's beautiful case study life. If you can't acknowledge you're burnt out, there's no certainty. There's no decision. There's no map. There's no target. There's just you going, oh crap. So go to that point of decision. Take us to there quickly, because one of the things Annie then talked about was prioritizing. So the reason I went to burnout is that you can't get to certainty, you can't get to decision if you can't even work out whether you want to have a hug and a kiss with your husband because you just don't want him around, or your kids are driving you nuts because they said you were old, and guess what, you are to them. So that was part of the reason I went there, Pete. Prioritize. Go to the thing about prioritize. and just explain that for a bit, Pete, before we sort of head towards wrapping this up. You were talking about certainty and decision. Speak to Annie about that and just see where it takes us.
Yeah, well, again, the idea of when we started talking about the 7 decisions, and within one of them it was talking about the certain decision, and I have decided.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember exactly what it said. I've decided. I haven't decided.
Deciding heart.
That's correct. Right.
Yep.
Right. Sorry. Yep. So when I was thinking the idea of how do you have use the concept of certainty when you're actually making a decision, because most of the time a decision is exactly that. You're weighing different situations, the odds, all that kind of thing, whatever it is, whether it's a personal, professional decision. And the idea of certainty is rarely going to be there, because nothing is 100% certain. But so the idea, when I was saying to Stephen, was do you start with the idea that you're certain and make the decision, or does the certainty come after you make the decision and you find out pretty quickly not pretty quickly, but you'll find out one way or the other. So it was just an interesting juxtaposition for me to talk about the idea of a certain decision. Not a specific one. I mean, a certain, that you're absolutely sure of this decision. And I just thought it was interesting. And of course, he added I have a decided heart. So then my wrestling was the brain and the heart. So that's where that was all coming from.
And I'm coming to you straight after this, Annie. So get ready, but go to the board, Pete. And just go full on the board for a second. Annie talked that her first step was target and purpose. Her second step was intentional action. Her third step, bearing in mind where my hand is the beginning. So from the moment Annie makes a decision, there's a purpose, target, an intentional action, which is map, and then her cause, which is almost her foundation. So the core of her map and her target is how she progresses, but she starts going back, where most people start here and get stuck. So Annie, here's the question to you, and come to all three of us, Pete. Where does certainty fit in the context of this whole process? Bearing in mind you go target, map, and core. To Peter's question, where does certainty and decision and certainty in your heart, where does that fit?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. So for me, there isn't 100% certainty. If I'm focusing, like the way I shared is the way I operate, that I'm all on the making sure that my purpose is going towards the right outcome, and I try and backtrack, because if it's working, then obviously all of the things that led to there were right. If it's not working, I then go back to, well, what are my intentional actions? Were they the right actions? If that wasn't working, what were my decisions? Did I make the right decisions? And then how did I make those decisions? Weren't they based on my beliefs? So I kind of do this backtrack intellectually in the way I do that. Saying that, I have 100% certainty in that step one. I do have at this stage of my life 100% certainty about my values and my beliefs and what I'm wanting to achieve and what I stand for and what I want to represent and who I want to be a blessing to. And so I do want to, I think from the learners, it's like try and spend time getting that, and that will develop and grow, and then back yourself, because the other end, when you're focusing on the outcomes, that's right, some of it, I don't have 100% certainty. I don't have 100% certainty now that my biography is going to be an international bestseller. I don't have 100% certainty that I will help to save sight of, 500,000 Australians in the next few years. I don't have certainty that all of my kids will be, happy, thriving adults. I don't have certainty in my own health. So certainty is, do I have that 100%? No. And that's okay. What I do have certainty is what is me leading to be in all of the areas of my business and life based on my foundations. And if I'm living with that sense of purpose and passion and intent, then I will be more certain, more confident, and I will allow the best outcome to actually happen. I'll encourage it. In fact, I'll even attract the positive energy and the support to really magnify that. So I see certainty is at the core. The purpose is a desired certainty. And then as we live and grow and we walk this walk in business and in life, then I have more certainty, the more opportunities I have to demonstrate that is working, So some things I try and they didn't work. And so, but if it worked 15 times, now I'm a change management CEO, and I have certainty that if I come into that company, I will help you achieve your outcomes, because I have I'm very confident and capable in what I do. So that is the certainty. Did I have that 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Probably I had a hope that I was going to do that, but now I have certainty.
Can you go full screen on this, Pete? Because this is one word that Peter loves, and we all love Pete to bits. He's a legend. He loves the concept of action, and he's been big on the concept of certainty. Annie, you said that you have a certainty in your core and you have a desired certainty. Freaking love that. You have a desired certainty in your target.
Yes.
So you have a certainty that you can create this book, Becoming Annie, and you have a desired certainty that it might have some level of success. But what is the certainty of action? What does that say to you? And come to all three of us, Pete, you included, please. Just lose the board. What is certain? And we'll finish on this. What does certainty of action mean to Annie Gibbons?
Certainty of action means that I am confident that if I'm living my life with intent, I have certainty that I know that I will do certain things every day, every week. Our future is the sum of the everyday today, isn't it? And so I know that, as a happy, thriving individual, I'll wake up and I'll do my exercise class, and I might meditate, and I'll go to work and I'll do certain actions. I'll lead in certain ways. I will empower the team around me in certain ways. I will, catch up with my family and those I love at certain times because of the way I operate. I have actions in my life that I have put there intentionally, and therefore I have certainty that they will happen because they're not random. They're not random at all. Occasionally things pop into our life that are random. Most things should be intentional, and therefore I have certainty that if I do them, I will be very likely to achieve my desired outcomes.
Cool. Pete, come to the board, and we'll wrap this up and then go back to Annie for any closing remarks. But this is what you just said and what I hear, and this is who Annie is based on what you just said, not a preconceived notion. Your certainty of action, Annie, is an intentional daily example. The intentional is your core, the daily is your map, and the example is your target.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love the way you unpack my thinking, Stephen. It's really
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate it. But the certainty of action to everyone watching, and this is inspired by Annie and a blessing from Peter pushing us back towards certainty. Thanks, buddy. Also, Peter loves the concept of action. Annie talked about her first step on the journey of decision to do anything is to actually have a desired certainty of a purpose, which is her target, an intentional action, which will be a combination of certainty and desire. But one thing Annie does when she gets to the third step, after she's worked out what the target is, what the map of how she's going to get there, is complete and utter certainty in her value, beliefs, the essence, and the significance of who she is. She makes a daily commitment with intention daily to be an example of the core map and target that makes Annie Gibbons becoming Annie.
Beautifully said.
I hope you got.
And to everyone listening, who are you becoming? What decision are you making based on the example of this amazing heart warrior we call in Sede land a heart warrior? What are you becoming? Based on the certainty in your heart, based on the guided decision, based on the people of wisdom that you've got around you. What decision have you made on who you're going to become for the benefit of other people? And when you go out and ask other people, what is the experience of me? How are they going to describe the example of your humanity? And if that's too deep for you, let me do it really simply. Who are you? Who are you? What's your intention for someone else? Or have you worked out that life's about you and wondered why no one's interested in your life? Your life is about others. Stop thinking it's about you. And if there's one classic thing about Annie, her commitment, even the way down the God serendipity of the universe, decided if she was going to have a family, she was going to have it at rapid fire so she could go all these years later as a grandmother now, doesn't look like it, but a grandmother now, and be an example to younger women that are both business women in an entrepreneurial era now where the world and society doesn't want women to go to work. It's demanding they claim their space. And guys like me need Annie's example for we to understand how is 80% good enough, because I thought I had to get all the nappies packed.
Yeah.
Pete, over to you to wrap all of this up. Thank you so much, gorgeous. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Annie. We appreciate. Wow, that just went in a direction. This is what I love about this. I'm sitting here. I have to pay attention. I'm supposed to click a couple buttons every now and then because I'm just kind of schooling myself and listening. But Annie, thank you for sharing all of your insights from your amazing story. I know that you and Stephen have a different type of relationship, and most of this stuff that you just talked about tonight, I've heard for the first time. So, and for any of the viewers, of course, there's so much in there that they can pull from that, especially, to Stephen's point, talking about professional women in the workplace, balancing home life, professional life, your goals, your dreams professionally, and then home and family, and all of those things are very complex and very deep and meaningful things to people today, especially women. And fathers as well, but women specifically, because I just think that there's certainly an extra burden on the shoulders of women today to balance those things. And you shared a lot of great insight there. So we really appreciate that.
That's really cool.
So I hope we'll get all those pictures out to her, Stephen, because those.
Absolutely. The whole pile of stuff that we'll do for that as well.
Thank you,
and
Annie.
I'll talk offline about some of the cuts and all of this as well, Annie, which is cool. We'll talk later today or tomorrow. That'll be cool. Thank you so much. You're a blessing to everybody, and people in New York, Jennifer, and ladies in the Philippines. They're all very grateful to you, and becoming Annie, fantastic.
Thank you, Annie. It's fantastic. Wow, that was just again, you went, and I'm going to tell you, I was just caught. I didn't put together, and this is what makes those aha things, is that I didn't put together the push that you had for the idea of burnout. I was trying to figure out. I mean, I had some ideas of where you were taking that, but to your point, there's no way of coming back from those other things if you can't acknowledge the idea that you're
you can't be certain, and you can't make decisions if you're burnt out. You can't. Yeah. There was a lot of the conversation I had with Graham yesterday with some of the advice and counsel he was giving me was the fact that we've got so much going on into Sede land right now that it's easy to almost feel a little overwhelmed and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of us do. So the end result of all of that is the reason I pushed to burnout. And for those who might think that was a bit personal towards me, it was. But anyone who is striving, anyone who's got a desire to do more than they've ever wanted to do in their life, anyone who's trying to unlock that whisper in their head, because you've either got a whisper of doubt or a roar of conviction. You've either got something that's whispering saying you can't, or if you've got this roar of conviction that you can. And if your roar is saying can't, tell it to shut up and start taking action. Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to push down on the burnout, if you've got burnout, the guided decisions, the 7 decisions are all gone. You don't want to hear any more wisdom because it's too hard. You don't want to have a deciding heart because it's too hard. You even with Annie, for example, and I know she's got a beautiful relationship with her and her husband, James, to get to a point as a woman, you just don't want to be around a man that you love and care for, but you just don't want it. Right. That's a big statement for someone who's in a loving relationship, said respectfully to Annie and James. So if you don't understand that you're in burnout, don't expect to be certain, don't expect to be creative, don't expect to be a good example. Because if you're snapping at your kids because you're overwhelmed, if you're snapping at your partner because you're overwhelmed, if you're snapping at yourself, don't expect to be certain. Because the only certain thing you're going to be is disrespectful, and you can't have dignity mandates if you can't be dignified to yourself.
Oh, so true. So true. Wow, Stephen. Let's and what I liked it, by the way, I'll finish on this note from the whiteboard, by the way. That you had at the let me just go down there. I just want to point something out to you that I just thought was amazing. And so just give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to find it again. Go back to the whiteboard here. I want to zoom down on something here. We had example. You see that down there in the very last one.
Yes, down here.
Yeah, there, and certainty of action, daily example. And I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of this show, we started talking about that whole idea. We started talking about the idea that about action and about the idea of examples, and the word icon was used. And yes. I said, you mean famous people? You said no, example as example. Yes. I just thought, wow, that was like at the very top of our conversation. And then here we are later at the day, and it comes right back down to example. So I just love that. I don't know if anyone knows.
No, it's good. And then I love the fact that you asked me about the concept of is icon famous? In mainstream pop culture, whatever that language is, most people go, yeah, icon, yeah, famous. I've got the Sede Angels are icons in my life.
Right.
They are.
Right.
They're significant examples of what it is to be forgiving and kind. They're significant examples of never, ever giving up on me, ever. They're unbelievable. And as a result, every single day, their example of this iconic kindness, this iconic forgiveness, this iconic love for me just makes me not want to quit.
That is fantastic. No, I love the use of the word that you use there, right there, about being iconic and so on. Let's bring up we started with basically the 7 decisions. I just want to bring you back.
All of this, okay.
No, I just want to bring you back to walk us through that just at the end here to kind of tie some of the things in that we talked about, especially obviously with Annie. She brought up a tremendous amount of ideas and we pushed about there's so much stuff in there, but you can kind of summarize a little bit for us about the 7 decisions for everyone watching.
Yeah, I just looked up the word 7 and it was a cardinal number. I didn't know that. It said of prime importance. That's cool. And I looked up the word decision. I had an idea of what it was, because whenever I do these slides at the beginning of the show that we do together, Pete, I'm always going to define what the heading is. So the 7 decisions is basically priming your mind.
Right.
It's the prime importance, priming your mind. So you need to be responsible and accept that it stops with me. Just scroll through them, Pete.
Sure.
You need to be a responsible decision. It stops with me. Guided. You need to have people of wisdom around you and invest in those. Coaches, mentor, the mainstream language. You need to be a person of action. I'm a person who's going to take action. The active decision, and Annie was clearly that, and is clearly that. You need to be certain, and that certain might be a desired certainty that Annie has. Write down, she has a certainty of value in her heart, and she had a desired certainty in her heart that the book will be successful. So what's the commitment to that? Joyful, you can only see her smile if we use Annie as an example for that. She chooses to be happy with everyone every time, and she is. She's an amazing human being. Compassionate, I have a forgiving spirit. We've listened to how she spoke as a woman and as a mum, and as a woman, having children say that you look fat and old and all that kind of stuff. Not that I don't think Annie's ever been that, but to have that forgiving spirit, she does. So you've got to have compassion, and you've got to start with yourself. And that was one of the things she talked about in Burnout. And then the persistent decision is I'm just never, ever going to quit. Even if I'm not going to quit, to use Annie's example on my desired certainty of my target. So those 7 decisions in summary: live your life by being responsible, guided, active, certain, joyful, compassionate, and persistence. Make those the life building blocks for you. Use the people states we talked about last week to draw people towards you, with not seeking love and affection, but giving it, and create a dignity in the way that you act, which is a signature of your life, which is respectful. And if you use those life building blocks and you use the people states from last week's show to create a dignity mandate, you will become an icon, not through how famous you are, but how influential in the soul of someone else's humanity.
Oh, gosh. Let's leave it right there, Stephen.
Done.
In the soul of humanity. You can't touch that one. I'm not going there.
I'm not even touching that one. I'm not even sure who said that, but anyway, there you go. It's out there.
You did. So thanks to everybody who joined us today on this live experience with Stephen DeSede. Stephen, you brought another amazing subject matter to the table, the 7 decisions. And I want to thank Annie for calling in and helping us unpack a lot of that found in there. But I loved, again, the way you dug deeper into that, and that's the experience of the live experience with Stephen DeSede. So thank you, fine sir, for spending all the time with us today, and thanks everyone for joining us on live, of course. And you can find more information about Stephen at his website, of course, www.stephendesede.com. So Stephen, you take care, my fine friend, and we shall do this again.
You bet.
We'll see you again soon. Okay.
Thanks. Take care.
Cheers, mate.
Be well and be brilliant, everyone.